They say trust is the foundation of a marriage, but in my case, it was the shovel my husband used to dig my grave. He spent 6 months convincing me I was paranoid, that the misplaced items were just my exhausted mind playing tricks. I believed him until a tiny light flashed from the smoke detector. While I was losing sleep, he was recording my downfall in high definition with his mistress. My name is Elena. At 34 years old, I had curated a life that looked flawless from the outside. As the owner of Vantage Point Interiors, I spent my days dictating the flow of energy in the multi-million-dollar homes of Chicago's elite, ensuring that every velvet cushion and marble coaster sat in perfect alignment. My own home, a sprawling penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan that I had inherited from my parents, was the crown jewel of my portfolio. It was a fortress of glass and steel, a place where dust dared not settle, or so I thought. My husband, Mark, fit into this pristine world like a custom-made suit. At 36, he was the CFO of a rising tech startup, handsome in that sharp, mathematical way that made people trust him with their money. He was the perfect counterweight to my creative chaos, always steady, always logical. He would kiss my forehead before leaving for work at 7 in the morning and pour me a glass of Pinot Noir when he returned at 8 in the evening. It was a rhythm I relied on, a metronome keeping time in a life that was becoming increasingly discordant. The dissonance started in the bedroom. It was subtle at first, the kind of things you brush off as a lapse in attention. I would come home to find the decorative pillows on the bed arranged in the wrong order, the silk bolster tilted to the left instead of the right. My bottle of perfume on the vanity would be turned 45 degrees, the label facing away from the mirror. Sometimes, there was a scent lingering in the air, something cloying and floral that clashed with my own crisp, citrus notes. I told myself it was the cleaning staff, or perhaps a draft from the vents. Then the objects began to vanish. My wedding ring, a platinum band encrusted with diamonds, disappeared from the nightstand dish where I placed it every single night. I tore the room apart, hyperventilating, checking the drawer 3 times. It was empty. 2 hours later, after I had collapsed on the bed in tears, I opened the drawer again to find the ring sitting right in the center, glinting innocently under the recessed lighting. My car keys did the same dance, vanishing from the foyer bowl only to reappear in my coat pocket hours later. I brought it up to Mark over dinner one Tuesday, my hands trembling as I held my fork. "Mark, I think someone has been in the apartment. Things are moving. My ring." It wasn't there. And then it was? Mark didn't look up from his steak immediately. He cut a precise square of meat, chewed slowly, and then fixed his gaze on me with a pitying softness that made my skin crawl. "Elena, honey." "Look at you. You're shaking. This is the workload speaking. You've been obsessing over the Kensington project for weeks. It's not work. Mark." I checked the drawer. It was empty. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. His palm felt dry and cool. "Babe, we talked about this. You're exhausted. When the brain is overloaded, it creates gaps. You put the ring in the drawer and forgot. It happens." I didn't forget, I whispered, though his certainty was already chipping away at my resolve. Mark sighed, a sound of heavy patience. "Do you remember your great-aunt Sarah? Your mother used to tell stories about how she started misplacing things right before the episodes started. Paranoid delusions are often the first sign of that genetic disposition kicking in. I just want to make sure you're okay." The mention of my family's medical history felt like a cold bucket of water. Was I slipping? The doubt took root instantly. Over the next few weeks, the exhaustion settled deep in my bones. I felt a constant fog wrapping around my brain, making simple tasks feel like wading through molasses. Mark became my caretaker. Every night, he would bring me a glass of water and 2 white pills, just some high-grade vitamins and supplements to help with the stress. He would say soothingly, Take them for me. You need the sleep. I took them. I swallowed them down with gratitude, thanking God for a husband who cared enough to monitor my health, but the sleep they brought was heavy and dreamless, until the night it wasn't. I woke up at 3 a.m, my body feeling like lead, my eyelids fluttering open against a drug-induced haze. The room was pitch black, save for the ambient city glow filtering through the sheer curtains. At the foot of the bed, a silhouette stood perfectly still. It was Mark. He wasn't moving. He was just watching me, his breathing silent, his posture rigid. "Mark," I croaked, my voice thick. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer. He just stood there for another 10 seconds before turning and walking silently out of the room. The next morning, when I asked him about it over coffee, he laughed. A short, dismissive sound. "Elena, I was asleep all night. You must have had a nightmare. See, this is exactly what I mean about the stress. You're seeing things that aren't there." I looked into my coffee cup, the dark liquid swirling, and wondered if he was right. I wondered if I was losing my mind in the beautiful golden cage I called home. The catastrophe happened on a Tuesday. I was presenting the final design concepts for the Kensington estate, a project worth nearly $2 million to my firm. When I opened my leather portfolio to reveal the mood boards, I froze. The elegant, neutral palettes I had spent weeks curating were gone. In their place were garish neon sketches from a rejected nightclub project 5 years ago. My client looked at me with a mixture of confusion and disdain. I stammered through an apology, my face burning, claiming it was an administrative error. But inside, my stomach churned with ice. I had packed that bag myself the night before. The only other person who had been near it was Mark, who had helpfully moved it to the foyer for me while I was brushing my teeth. That evening, Mark poured me a glass of Merlot and sat next to me on the sofa, his expression grave. "Elena, I heard about the meeting. The client called the office main line. This is getting dangerous. You're sabotaging your own career. I didn't put those sketches there," I cried, my voice cracking. "I checked that bag 3 times. Just like you checked the drawer for your ring," Mark asked softly, tilting his head. "Honey, maybe it's time we took some pressure off. I think you should sign over temporary management of your finances to me, just for a few months, until you get better. You won't have to worry about bills or investments. You can just rest." A primal alarm bell rang in the back of my skull. Despite the fog in my brain, my instinct to protect my inheritance kicked in. "No," I said, pulling my hand away. "I can handle my money. Mark, I'm just tired." He looked disappointed, almost hurt, but he didn't push. Not yet. Instead, he retreated into his phone. He had been doing that a lot lately, his thumbs flying across the screen at all hours. He had changed his passcode recently, too. When I asked, he claimed it was protocol for a new top-secret project called Titan Nexus. 2 days later, the isolation began in earnest. I came home to find the house silent. Maria, our housekeeper who had been with me since before I met Mark, was gone. I had to let her go, Mark told me, not looking up from his laptop. I caught her slipping silver spoons into her apron. "We can't have thieves around you in this fragile state." "Maria would never steal," I shouted, but the energy drained out of me instantly. I felt heavy, sedated. That heaviness was what saved me. I realized the lethargy wasn't natural. While Mark was at a board meeting, I drove to a private clinic in the suburbs, paying cash so there would be no insurance trail. I demanded a full toxicology panel. The results came back in 48 hours. My blood contained trace amounts of benzodiazepines and a sedative used to treat severe insomnia. I had never been prescribed these drugs. I sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at the paper. The fear that had paralyzed me for months evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp rage. The nightly vitamins Mark insisted I take. He wasn't caring for me. He was drugging me. He was making me pliable, making me forget, making me look crazy to the world so he could take everything. I drove home with a clarity I hadn't felt in half a year. I arrived an hour earlier than usual. As I walked up the stairs to the master bedroom, the door was shut. I paused, holding my breath. Inside, I heard a low murmur, a woman's giggle, then Mark's voice, low and intimate. I threw the door open. Mark was sitting alone on the edge of the bed, his laptop open. He jumped, slamming the screen shut. Jesus. Elena, you scared me to death. Who were you talking to? I demanded, scanning the room. The closet was empty. The bathroom was empty. Nobody. He stood up, adjusting his tie, looking flustered. I was on a conference call. Titan Nexus. I told you. Strict confidentiality. Why are you home early? I just felt sick. I lied, testing his reaction. You need to rest, he said, the mask of concern sliding back into place. Did you take your vitamins? Not yet. That night, I pretended to swallow the pills he gave me, tucking them under my tongue until I could spit them into the toilet. I lay in bed next to the man who was systematically destroying me, listening to his steady breathing. I couldn't sleep. My eyes wandered around the darkened room, tracing the shadows. A street lamp outside flickered, sending a beam of light across the ceiling. It hit the new smoke detector Mark had installed last week to replace the faulty one. A tiny, unnatural glint reflected back. It wasn't the dull plastic of a sensor. It was the curved glass reflection of a lens. I stared at it, my heart hammering against my ribs. He wasn't just gaslighting me. He was watching me. As soon as the elevator doors slid shut, sealing Mark inside for his descent to the garage, I moved. I did not run. I moved with the precision of a site manager inspecting a structural flaw. I dragged the aluminum stepladder from the utility closet and set it up directly beneath the suspicious device in the master bedroom. Up close, the deception was elegant. To an untrained eye, it was a standard smoke detector. But I have spent 15 years sourcing hardware for the most demanding clients in Chicago. I know the difference between a sensor vent and a microphone port. I twisted the casing counterclockwise. It did not detach. It pivoted, revealing a micro SD slot and a reset button. It was a high-end surveillance unit, likely custom-ordered. My first instinct was to smash it with a hammer, but I stopped myself. Destruction is what a hysterical woman would do, a woman who was losing her mind. I needed to be cold. I needed to be the architect of my own defense. I climbed down and retrieved my iPad. Mark always underestimated my technical literacy. He thought interior design was just picking fabric swatches and paint colors. He forgot that I regularly integrated complex home automation systems for penthouses worth $20 million. I opened my network diagnostic tool. Sure enough, there was a hidden Wi-Fi network broadcasting on a separate channel. It was named Titan Nexus Secure, likely short for his fake work project. I guessed the password on the second try. It was the date of our wedding, followed by an exclamation point. The arrogance of it made bile rise in my throat. Once inside the local network, the scope of his betrayal unfolded on my screen. There was not just one feed. There were 3. Camera 1 was the master bedroom. Camera 2 was the living room, angled specifically to catch the foyer console where I kept my keys. Camera 3 was inside my private home office. I accessed the storage history. It was not just saving to the SD cards, it was uploading to a private cloud server. I initiated a full download to an encrypted external hard drive I used for client backups. While the progress bar crawled forward, I started watching the clips from last week. The video quality was crystal clear. I watched, trembling, as the digital timestamp showed 2 a.m. On screen, Mark slid out of bed while I slept. He walked over to the dresser, picked up my wedding ring, and dropped it into his pajama pocket. I watched him move my car keys from the bowl to the pocket of my trench coat. I watched him stand in the kitchen, grinding a white powder into my evening tea, stirring it with a chilling calmness before bringing it to me with a smile. Here you go, babe, the digital mark said on the screen. Drink this. It will help you sleep. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream, but the horror was not finished. I clicked on a file dated 3 days ago. The bedroom. Midday. Mark walked in, but he was not alone. Sienna followed him, his 24-year-old assistant, the girl I had taken to lunch, the girl I had mentored. She was laughing, kicking off her heels and flopping onto my bed, the bed I shared with my husband. God, this mattress is amazing, Sienna said, her voice tinny through the iPad speakers. When are you going to get rid of her? Mark. Her weeping is getting old. Mark sat beside her, loosening his tie. Patience. The doctor says the psych evaluation is the final nail. Once she is declared mentally incompetent, the power of attorney kicks in. I get full control of the Vantage Point accounts and the trust fund. And the penthouse, Sienna asked, tracing a finger down his chest. And the penthouse? Mark confirmed. We just need one public breakdown. One big scene where she looks dangerous. Then I can sign the commitment papers. I stared at the screen, the tears drying on my face as a cold, hard resolve solidified in my chest. This was not just infidelity. It was not just cruelty. It was a calculated, multi-million-dollar heist. They were going to steal my life, my business, and my freedom. They wanted to lock me away in a padded room while they drank my wine and spent my money. I looked up at the hidden camera lens and slowly closed the iPad. They wanted a crazy woman. I would give them a performance worthy of an Academy Award, but I would be writing the ending. The transformation was instantaneous. The moment I closed that laptop, the weeping, confused Elena died. In her place rose someone entirely different, a woman cold enough to freeze the blood in her veins if it meant survival. I decided not to strike immediately. To catch a predator, one must become the bait. I needed them arrogant. I needed them sloppy. So, I put the mask back on. That afternoon, I bought a prepaid phone with cash at a convenience store 3 blocks away. I sat in my car and dialed the number for Helen Voss. In Chicago legal circles, they did not call her a lawyer. They called her the Shark. She listened to my story without interruption. Elena, listen to me closely, Helen said, her voice like gravel wrapped in silk. In Illinois, cheating makes him a bad husband, but it does not necessarily destroy him in court. If you want to bury him, if you want to leave him with nothing but the lint in his pockets, I need financial fraud. I need proof he is stealing from the marital estate to fund the affair. Can you get that I can get anything? I replied. For the next 3 days, I gave the performance of a lifetime. I knew exactly where the cameras were, and I played to my audience. I would sit in the living room, staring blankly at a wall, and begin to weep uncontrollably. I walked in circles muttering to myself, asking invisible people where they had hidden my jewelry. Why are you doing this to me? I whispered to the empty air, knowing that somewhere, Mark and Sienna were watching the feed, clinking champagne glasses and laughing at my descent into madness. Every tear I shed was calculated. Every tremble of my hand was rehearsed. I was feeding their ego, making them feel invincible. While I played the victim at home, I was the hunter abroad. I hired a forensic accountant recommended by Helen to shadow Mark's digital footprint. The report came back within 48 hours, and it was damning. The mysterious Titan Nexus project expenses were not server costs or software licenses. They were transactions at Cartier, Chanel, and a 5-star resort in Cabo. He had drained over $45,000 from our joint savings in 3 months. But the smoking gun was the lease. Mark had rented a luxury apartment on the north side, a place costing $5,000 a month. The tenant listed was Sienna Miller. The payments were coming directly from our emergency family trust, labeled as medical consultancy fees for my supposed treatments. He was using my money to house his mistress while convincing the world I was the one who needed help. On Friday evening, Mark came home with a bouquet of lilies, my least favorite flower. He wore a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Elena, sweetheart," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I hate seeing you so isolated. I've decided to throw a small gathering for your birthday next week. Just a few friends, some of my investors, and my parents. We need to show everyone you're still, you know, with us." My birthday was not for another month. "Oh, Mark," I stammered, widening my eyes in feigned panic. "I don't think I can handle a crowd. The voices, they get so loud when there are people." "Nonsense," he said firmly, squeezing my shoulder a little too hard. "It will be good for you. I insist." I lowered my head to hide the smirk threatening to break through. "Okay, if you think it's best." Later that night, I accessed the hidden server again. I found a clip from earlier that day. Mark and Sienna were in his office. "She's going to crack," Mark told her, laughing. "I've invited the entire board when she starts screaming about cameras and stolen keys in front of the investors. It's over. We'll have 20 witnesses for the competency hearing. Make sure she drinks the punch," Sienna replied, painting her nails. "I want her to be completely unhinged." I watched them plot my destruction with a calmness that frightened even me. They thought they were setting a trap for a wounded animal. They had no idea they were inviting a wolf to dinner. "You want a show?" "Mark," I whispered to the screen, "I will give you a show." 7 days before the party that was supposed to mark the end of my life as a sane woman, we were sitting at the breakfast table. The morning sun was streaming across the Italian marble, illuminating the particles of dust dancing in the air. Mark was buttering a piece of toast with the same meticulous, predatory precision he applied to everything. He looked at me over the rim of his coffee mug, his eyes crinkling with that faux concern that had become his trademark. "Elena, I really think we should call Dr. Eris today," he said, his voice dripping with syrup. "You were talking in your sleep again last night, screaming about keys and shadows. It is getting worse. Honey, we need to get you admitted for observation before the party. I can't have you having an episode in front of the investors." I looked at him. For the first time in 6 months, I didn't look down. I didn't wring my hands. I didn't tremble. I slowly placed my ceramic cup back onto its saucer with a deliberate, soft click. Then, I smiled. It wasn't the weak, apologetic smile of a broken wife. It was sharp, cold, and entirely devoid of warmth. "Mark," I said, keeping my voice terrifyingly even, "I have a question about home maintenance." He frowned, confused by the sudden shift in my demeanor. "Now, what is it?" I leaned forward, resting my chin on my laced fingers. "That little red light on the smoke detector in our bedroom, does it blink when the battery is low, or does it blink when it is recording in 4K resolution?" The effect was immediate. It was absolute. Mark froze, his hand, halfway to his mouth with a piece of toast, stopped in mid-air. The blood drained from his face so fast it was as if someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. His eyes widened, staring at me with the raw, naked panic of a man who realizes the trapdoor has just swung open beneath his feet. The silence in the kitchen was heavy, suffocating. I didn't let him recover. I twisted the knife, and while we are on the subject of technology, I continued, my voice light and conversational. "Why does Sienna know the password to our hidden Wi-Fi network? I heard her read it out loud to you in the video from last Tuesday. Specifically, the part where she called me a pathetic cow and asked when you were going to sign the committal papers." Mark dropped the toast. It landed butterside down on his pristine suit pants. But he didn't even notice. He scrambled to his feet, his chair screeching against the floor. His eyes darted to my phone, which was sitting face down on the table next to my hand. "Elena, I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his voice climbing an octave. "You're hallucinating again. This is exactly what I mean. Give me your phone. We need to call the doctor now." He lunged for the device. I didn't flinch. I simply placed my hand over it. "Sit down. Mark," I commanded. My voice was not loud, but it possessed an authority that hit him like a physical blow. "If you touch this phone, or if you touch me, I will blink, and every single video file, the drugging, the affair, the embezzlement discussions will be sent to the board of directors, the police, and your parents. It is already uploaded to a secure server with a dead man's switch. My lawyer has the key." Mark halted. He stood there, chest heaving, his hands hovering uselessly in the air. He looked at me, really looked at me, and saw that the fragile creature he had been tormenting was gone. In her place was the woman who had built a multi-million-dollar business from scratch. "What? What do you want?" he whispered, collapsing back into his chair. "I want you to finish your breakfast," I said calmly, picking up my coffee again. "And then you are going to continue planning this party. You are going to invite every single person on that guest list, the investors, the partners, your judgmental mother, everyone." "Why?" he asked, a flicker of hope sparking in his eyes. He was calculating again. He thought I was bluffing, or perhaps he thought he could still manipulate the narrative if he just bought some time. "Because I want a celebration." "Mark," I smiled, taking a sip of the coffee I had brewed myself, "and you are going to give it to me. If you cancel, the videos go public. If you try to run, the videos go public. If you look at me the wrong way, the videos go public. Do we understand each other?" Mark nodded slowly, swallowing hard. He was terrified, but I could see the gears turning. He thought he could outsmart me in a week. He thought he could find the files or convince everyone I was faking the evidence. "Good," I said. "Now clean up that toast. You're making a mess of my floor." The week leading up to the party was a masterclass in psychological warfare. For the first time in our marriage, the power dynamic had shifted completely. Mark was no longer the master of the house. He was a hostage in a $3,000 suit, walking on eggshells that I had scattered. I made him serve me. I made him cook. I made him massage my feet while I watched television, knowing that every touch made his skin crawl with anxiety. "Mark, deeper on the arch," I said on Wednesday evening, sipping the vintage Cabernet he had been saving for his promotion. "You seem tense, darling. Are you worried about the party?" He flinched, his hands slick with sweat. No, of course not. I just want everything to be perfect for you." "It will be," I assured him. "By the way, where is my engagement ring?" "The 3-carat solitaire. I want to wear it on Saturday." Mark went pale. I knew exactly where it was. He had pawned it 2 weeks ago to pay for a diamond necklace for Sienna. It's at the jeweler's," he stammered, avoiding my eyes. "Getting cleaned." "Get it back," I said coldly, changing the channel on the remote. "By noon tomorrow. Or I email the video of you crushing pills into my tea to the state medical board." He got it back. "My forensic accountant told me Mark had to take out a high-interest loan from a predatory lender in South Chicago to retrieve it. When he placed it on my dresser the next day, his hands were shaking so bad he scratched the mahogany, while Mark scrambled to keep his house of cards from collapsing. I was busy planting dynamite at the foundation. I arranged a private lunch with the senior partners of his firm at the Drake Hotel, over lobster bisque. I played the role of the concerned, supportive wife perfectly. Mark has been under such tremendous pressure with the Titan Nexus project. I told them, lowering my voice confidentially. "I worry about his judgment lately. We are thinking about a sabbatical after this quarter. Some personnel changes might be necessary." They nodded gravely, appreciating my candor, completely unaware that I was priming them for his professional execution. Back at home, the irony was delicious. Mark was terrified to tell Sienna the truth. He was too cowardly to admit that his plan had failed, so she was still texting him, oblivious to the fact that she was walking into a slaughter. I saw her messages pop up on his phone while he was in the shower. Is the witch crazy enough yet I picked out a dress for the party? Can't wait to see her face when they drag her away. He never replied. He just deleted the threads and took more antacids. I tightened the noose on his finances on Thursday. I called the bank and reported suspicious activity on all his secondary credit cards, freezing them instantly. When he tried to pay for the caterers, his card was declined. He had to use the last of his cash reserves, sweating profusely while the event planner looked at him with pity. When he asked me about it, I feigned innocence. "Oh, that's strange," I said, examining my manicure. "Maybe the bank's system is down. You should probably just focus on the speech you are going to give about my recovery." I spent my nights in the guest room, editing. I took all the footage, the betrayal, the theft, the mockery, and I wove it into a video presentation. I titled the file Our Love Journey. It started with our wedding photos. Sweet and nostalgic, designed to lull the audience into a false sense of security before the horror began. The final touch was the dress. For years, Mark had insisted I wear beige, cream, or pale pink. He said it made me look soft and compliant. On Friday afternoon, I walked into the most expensive boutique on the Magnificent Mile and bought a gown of structured silk. It was red, not a polite maroon, but a violent blood-red scarlet that screamed danger. It was a dress for a woman who was coming for blood. The night before the party, the house was quiet. The decorations were up, the flowers arranged. Mark stood by the window, staring out at the city lights, looking like a man awaiting a firing squad. I walked up behind him, the floorboards creaking under my feet. "Mark," I said softly. He jumped, spinning around to face me. His eyes were hollow, rimmed with dark circles from lack of sleep. "Tomorrow is going to be the most memorable day of your life," I whispered, smoothing the lapel of his jacket. "I hope you are ready." He tried to speak, but his voice failed him. He just nodded, a puppet whose strings were about to be cut. The penthouse was transformed into a glittering arena. Crystal chandeliers refracted the light into 1,000 rainbows, bouncing off the polished marble floors and the jewels draped around the necks of Chicago's elite. The air smelled of expensive perfume, imported orchids, and the crisp ozone of impending disaster. Mark's parents, Richard and Beatrice, were holding court near the bar. Beatrice, in her usual judgmental glory, scanned the room with narrowed eyes. She had never thought I was good enough for her son, and tonight, she believed she was finally going to be proven right. Poor Mark. I heard her whisper to a senator's wife. He has been a saint dealing with her episodes. We're just hoping to get her the help she needs quietly. Then there was Sienna. She had arrived early, ostensibly to help coordinate the catering staff, but really to watch the fireworks. She wore a sleek black dress that was just a shade too tight for a professional event. When she saw me descending the staircase in my blood-red gown, her smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. She expected a frazzled, medicated ghost. Instead, she got a queen. She recovered quickly, though, shooting me a look of such profound fake pity that I almost laughed. She had no idea she was standing on a trap door. Mark was a wreck. He was sweating through his tuxedo shirt, his eyes darting between me and the exits like a trapped animal. Every time a guest laughed, he jumped. He tried to intercept me at the bottom of the stairs, his hand reaching out to grab my elbow. "Elena, please," he hissed, his voice trembling. "Don't do this. We can just cut the cake and let everyone go home. You don't have to speak." I pulled my arm away and fixed him with a stare so cold it could have frozen the champagne in his glass. "Get out of my way, Mark," I said softly. He froze, stepping back as if burned. The power I held over him was intoxicating. I walked to the small stage set up in the center of the living room. The murmur of conversation died down as I tapped the microphone. The sound echoed through the high ceilings, drawing every eye in the room to me. Mark was standing near the audio equipment, his face ashen. Sienna was near the kitchen door, crossing her arms and waiting for the meltdown. "Good evening." "Everyone," I began, my voice clear and steady. "Thank you all for coming tonight. My husband, Mark, insisted on this gathering. He has been so worried about my mental health lately." A few uncomfortable coughs rippled through the crowd. Beatrice looked smug. "It is true," I continued, smiling at Mark. "I have been struggling. I have been forgetful. I have been exhausted. But I have been so lucky to have a husband who takes such meticulous care of me, who ensures I take my special vitamins every single night." Mark flinched. He took a step toward the stage, panic rising in his chest. "But words can't really express the depth of his devotion," I said, gesturing to the massive projection screen behind me. "So, I prepared a special video, a montage of the most honest moments of our marriage over the last 6 months. Please, turn your attention to the screen." Mark didn't just step, he lunged. He bolted toward the AV console, his hand outstretched to rip the HDMI cable from the port. "Turn it off," he screamed. "Technical difficulties. Turn it off," but he never made it. 2 men in dark suits, private security I had hired that morning, stepped out from the shadows and blocked his path. They didn't touch him, they just stood there, a wall of muscle that Mark could not pass. He bounced off them, looking around wildly. The screen flickered to life. The room went silent. It wasn't a slideshow of vacations. The image was crisp, high-definition 4K. It showed our kitchen island, filmed from a high angle. The timestamp was 2 weeks ago. Mark stood at the counter. He looked around furtively, then pulled a small plastic bag from his pocket. He crushed 2 white pills with the back of a spoon, the sound of the crunching amplified by the high-quality speakers. He swept the powder into my favorite teacup, poured hot water over it, and stirred. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. A wine glass shattered somewhere in the back. On screen, Mark smiled to himself, a cruel, self-satisfied smirk that the audience had never seen before. "Sleep tight, crazy bitch," the digital Mark whispered. In the penthouse, the silence was absolute. All eyes turned from the screen to the man standing by the wall, shaking in his tuxedo. The video on the screen cut sharply to a new angle. This time, the camera was positioned high on the bookshelf in our bedroom. The timestamp read 3 days prior. Mark was not sleeping. He was frantically tearing through my nightstand drawers. The audience watched in stunned silence as he pulled out my passport and my grandmother's vintage sapphire earrings, shoving them deep behind the heavy oak dresser to stage their disappearance. Then, the scene shifted again. This was the footage that made the air in the room turn solid. Mark and Sienna were tangled together on my bed, the very bed I slept in every night. They were laughing. I had instructed the sound technician to maximize the audio for this specific clip, and the result was deafening. God, she is so pathetic. Sienna's voice boomed through the penthouse speakers, clear and cruel. "Do you think the judge will grant the conservatorship before Christmas? I want to spend the holidays in Aspen, not in this freezing city." "Don't worry," Mark's voice replied, his hand running through her hair. "One more public breakdown, and she is done. I have already drafted the power of attorney. Once she is in the facility, we liquidate the trust fund and buy the villa. She won't even know what day it is by the time we are done with her." The silence in the room shattered. It was replaced by a sound I will never forget, the collective intake of breath from 50 of Chicago's most influential people. Then came the whispers, rising like a tide of hornets. The gazes that had been pinned on the screen whipped around to land on Mark and Sienna. It was not just judgment, it was revulsion. These were people who tolerated affairs, but they did not tolerate the clumsy, malicious destruction of one of their own. I looked over at Mark's parents. Richard stood frozen, his face the color of ash. Beatrice, The woman who had spent years telling me I wasn't good enough for her son let out a strangled, high-pitched wail. She clutched her pearls and collapsed into a nearby armchair, fanning herself frantically with a cocktail napkin. It was a theatrical faint, but the humiliation radiating off her was genuine. She knew, in that moment, that her social standing was dead. Sienna realized the danger before Mark did. She tried to make a run for it, hiking up her black dress and aiming for the service elevator. She didn't make it 5 feet. Mrs. Galloway, the wife of Mark's CEO and a woman who controlled the charity gala circuit with an iron fist, stepped directly in her path. She was flanked by 2 other board members' wives. They didn't touch her. They simply formed a wall of diamonds and disdain. I wouldn't leave just yet. Honey, Mrs. Galloway said, her voice dripping with ice. The show isn't over. Sienna shrank back, looking like a cornered rat, her eyes darting wildly for an escape that didn't exist. I raised the microphone to my lips one last time. My hand was steady. I felt a surge of power that was almost electric. What you are seeing, I said, my voice cutting through the chaotic murmurs, is not just a moral failing. It is a crime. You saw him dose my tea with unprescribed sedatives. That is assault and battery with a noxious substance. You heard them conspiring to falsify medical records to seize control of my assets. That is fraud and conspiracy to commit grand larceny. As if I had summoned them with a magic spell. The double doors of the penthouse burst open. Helen Voss had timed it perfectly. 4 uniformed Chicago police officers marched into the room, their heavy boots thudding against the marble floors. They didn't look at the guests or the champagne tower. They walked straight toward the man trembling against the wall. Mark Stevenson. The lead officer barked, his voice booming over the lingering audio of the video. You are under arrest for domestic battery, poisonous substance administration, and financial fraud. Put your hands behind your back. The click of the handcuffs was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It broke Mark completely. The arrogance, the smugness, the confidence, it all dissolved into pure animalistic terror. It wasn't me, Mark screamed, struggling against the officer's grip, spit flying from his mouth as he pointed a shaking finger across the room. It was her. It was Sienna. She made me do it. She said we needed the money I wanted to stop. Sienna shrieked, her face twisting into a mask of ugly rage. You liar! You sick liar! You told me she was crazy. You told me you wanted to kill her to get the insurance officer. He is the one who bought the drugs. The room erupted into chaos as the officers moved to cuff Sienna as well. I stood on the stage, the red dress flowing around me like armor, and watched them turn on each other. It was ugly. It was loud. And it was absolutely perfect. The legal machinery ground Mark to dust with satisfying speed. At 9 sharp the morning after the party, Helen Voss filed the divorce petition. It was not a negotiation. It was an eviction notice from my life. We had a prenuptial agreement, one that Mark had arrogantly signed 5 years ago thinking he would never be the one in the wrong. The infidelity and criminal misconduct clause was triggered immediately. This meant Mark did not just walk away with nothing, he walked away owing me damages. By noon that same day, his professional life was extinguished. I had forwarded the forensic accounting report to the board of directors at his startup. It turns out that embezzling company funds to pay for a mistress's apartment and disguising it as security consulting is frowned upon in the tech world. Mark was fired for cause. He was escorted out of the building by security, carrying a single cardboard box, while his former colleagues watched in silence. Sienna fared no better. The internet is a cruel, efficient judge. Somehow, the video clip of her mocking my mental health and plotting to steal my inheritance leaked to a popular local blog. She was branded a predator and a gold digger. Her reputation was incinerated overnight. When she tried to apply for a job at a rival design firm, they laughed her out of the lobby. She had to delete all her social media accounts to escape the barrage of hate comments. The financial settlement was a bloodbath. Helen was ruthless. We stripped Mark of every asset he had tried to hide. I reclaimed the full value of the funds he had stolen, plus significant damages for emotional distress. To pay the court-ordered judgment, Mark had to liquidate his few remaining personal assets. I sat across from him during the final mediation. He looked 10 years older. His suit was wrinkled, and his hands would not stop shaking. "Elena, please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I have to sell the Porsche. It is the only thing I have left. If I sell it, I have nothing. I have to move back in with my parents. I will be living in their basement at 36 years old." I looked at him, remembering the nights I lay awake terrified that I was losing my mind because of this man. "The basement will be good for your humility." "Mark," I replied, signing the final page of the settlement. "Think of it as a reset. Just make sure you check the smoke detectors down there." I did not stay in the penthouse. The air there felt heavy, tainted by months of gaslighting and deceit. I put it on the market and it sold in 3 days. With the proceeds, I bought a sprawling stone villa on the edge of Lake Geneva. It was a property Mark had always hated. He had called it drafty and too isolated. To me, it looked like a sanctuary. It had high ceilings, ancient oaks in the garden, and 0 smart home devices connected to the cloud. Before I moved, I had one final task. Mark had left behind his entire wardrobe, rows of bespoke Italian suits and silk ties. He had asked for them back through his lawyer. I refused. Instead, I boxed them all up and called a local charity that supports women escaping domestic violence. They sold the clothes to fund their legal aid clinic. I made the donation in Mark's name. I insisted they list him as a reluctant benefactor in their monthly newsletter. A week later, I met Helen for a celebratory drink. She slid a manila folder across the table. The district attorney accepted the plea deal, she told me, taking a sip of her martini. He is looking at a suspended sentence and 500 hours of community service. He avoids prison time, but he will have a felony fraud conviction on his record forever. He will never work in finance again. He is unhireable. I looked at the file, at the mugshot of the man I once thought I would grow old with. He looked small. "Good," I said, closing the folder and pushing it away. He is finally someone else's problem. 6 months have passed since the night the truth exploded on a projection screen in my penthouse. I am sitting in my new office on the 34th floor of the Hancock Center, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The city looks different from up here. It used to look like a maze I was trapped in, a grid of streets where I was constantly looking over my shoulder. Now, it looks like a canvas. The fog that Mark had spent half a year wrapping around my mind has completely lifted. I wake up in the morning, and I remember where I put my keys. I remember where I left my phone. The silence in my head is no longer empty. It is peaceful. I did not just rebuild my life. I reinforced it. I overhauled the entire security protocol for Vantage Point Interiors. I hired a new team of cybersecurity experts to sweep every device I own, turning the trauma of being watched into a masterclass in digital self-defense. But my favorite security upgrade breathes and has 4 legs. "Come here. Justice," I called out softly. A sleek, 80-pound Doberman trotted over from his bed in the corner and rested his heavy head on my knee. I named him Justice because he is swift, loyal, and terrifying to anyone who tries to cross a boundary. He is the only male I trust implicitly right now. Unlike Mark, who gaslit me into believing I was weak, Justice looks at me like I am the center of the universe. My business has not just recovered, it has thrived. The scandal, rather than ruining me, garnered a wave of public support I never expected. Clients wanted to work with the woman who outsmarted a con artist. They trusted my eye for detail because they knew I saw things others missed. I was finally designing with my full capacity, my creativity no longer stifled by the drug-induced haze Mark had kept me in. Mark still tries, occasionally. I get voicemails from unknown numbers, usually late at night when the loneliness of his parents' basement sets in. "Elena, please, just pick up." His voice cracked in a voicemail I received last Tuesday. "I can't make rent this month. The legal fees are drowning me. We were partners once. Doesn't that mean anything? I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity." I simply tapped the block button on my screen. It was a muscle memory now, as automatic and emotionless as taking out the trash. I am not rushing into anything new, but I am not closing doors either. I recently started consulting with a new architect, a man named Julian. He is kind, soft-spoken, and brutally honest about his work. Yesterday, when we were reviewing blueprints, he noticed I was tired. "Elena, we can stop," Julian said, closing the folder. "You don't have to push yourself for my sake. The work will be here tomorrow. Your peace of mind is more important." It was a small comment, but it struck a chord. It was the opposite of Mark's suffocating control. I am enjoying the slowness of it, the transparency. I am learning that trust is not given blindly. It is earned in increments. I swiveled my chair around to face the corner of the ceiling. There is a camera there, a sleek, modern security device I had installed myself. 6 months ago, the sight of a lens would have sent me into a panic attack. Now, I looked at it and felt nothing but calm. It does not control me. It serves me. I am the one watching. I am the one holding the remote. I turned back to my computer monitor. In the center of the desktop sat a single folder named Evidence. It contained the terabytes of footage I had downloaded from Mark's hidden server, the proof of his betrayal, the videos of his cruelty, the recordings of my own manufactured madness. For a long time, I kept it as a shield, a reminder of what I survived. But I realized I don't need the shield anymore. The war is over. I won. I right-clicked on the folder. I selected Delete. A confirmation box popped up, asking if I was sure I wanted to permanently remove these files. "Goodbye, Mark," I whispered, a genuine smile touching my lips. I clicked Yes. The recycling bin emptied. The screen was clear. He was gone, erased from my hard drive just as he had been erased from my life. He did not deserve to occupy even a single bite of my memory. I stood up, grabbed Justice's leash, and walked out of the door, ready to design a future that was entirely my own. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I would love to connect with you all. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.